Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. The Vikings have extended tight end TJ Hockenson. Big news in Vikings country.
Hey, this is Arif Hasan with Wide Left. The Vikings have extended TJ Hockenson. Big news in Vikings country.
And I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. Big news in Vikings country. The Vikings rostered Najee Thompson.
It's a victory lap Thursday for Luke Braun in that regard. That's next on the Minnesota Football Party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party.
Welcome in a big Thursday on the Minnesota Football Party. Glad you've joined us today on YouTube, on Locked On Sports Minnesota, wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Sam Ekstrom. You met Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. You met Arif Hasan of the Wide Left Substack. We might have a Ron Johnson appearance later on of the Ron Johnson Show. We might have a Luke Inman appearance. He's holding out for a new deal, just like TJ Hockenson was, guys. Adam Schefter confirmed it, by the way. It was a hold-in the whole time. I told you that's my victory lap for the day. But we're going to talk extensive TJ Hockenson contract news on today's show. We're, of course, going to circle back to the 53-man roster, talk about the roster construction and the moves that have been made since. Running back help, tackle help, and a practice squad has also been constructed. So much to talk about with Luke Braun and Arif Hasan today on a program that is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get started today with America's #1 sports book. This broke about 3 hours ago, just seconds before the Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah press conference. Vikings also announced the captains. That's definitely secondary, though, to the bigger news. TJ Hockenson signs. Arif, you had the Tom Pelissero terms pulled up on this deal. So why don't you just rattle it off? Let's get it out there, and then we'll discuss it. What is the money for TJ Hockenson?
It is $66 million over 4 years, averaging some amount of money, 17 point something, 16 something. I don't know.
16.5 unless you count the incentives, or 75 over 5 if you count this year.
Right. I only want to count the new money, so it gives us an easier comparison to other tight ends, because typically we don't, if we only count all the money, right, then we don't compare that to other tight ends. So 68.5 with incentives. Don't know what those incentives are. I imagine they are all pro incentives because he's already hit Pro Bowl incentives. That
could be
would
workout
mean
bonuses too. Could be just like $500K a year.
That would be included, I think, in the 66, because reporters tend to report likely to be earned bonuses as part of the thing. I mean, that's just how the reporting tends to work out. So 68.5 over 4 in max value, that's $17.125 million over the course of the 4 years, which would be the highest total average per year if you counted all of the incentives, and we did not count all of the incentives for any other tight end. The cash flow is $32 million over 2 years. The real number is $48 million over 3 years. That's the number you have to pay the most attention to. The full guarantee is $29 million at signing. That includes $9 million on his rookie deal, which means a total guarantee of $42.5 million, which suggests to me that the 4th year of the deal is essentially funny money. It's completely unguaranteed. Really, really great fodder for restructuring and new signing bonuses and option bonuses. Really cool
void years,
stuff
baby.
He signed through 2027, which is when I assume the void year is.
It's like kind of a void year because it's a fake year. And honestly, what's the
void year asterisk? Yeah.
So of note, this is the only tight end deal, a big money tight end deal signed in 2023, which means you cannot compare it to actually any other tight end deal. So
at least not apples to apples, right?
Not apples to apples. You have to make some adjustments.
Yeah, we knew that this was going to be big. It was probably going to be top 3. If you're going on average annual, Darren Waller was the mark to beat at 17. And this comes just shy of that without the incentives, just over it with the incentives. But it's up there. It's top 2 in average annual value. Arif, you had a tweet, though, suggesting that percentage of cap was only 6th highest, I believe. Explain that for us.
Yeah, so because the cap increases every year, a fact that people just seem to ignore when they talk about player contracts, yet seem to acknowledge that this is the biggest, position deal in NFL history, is that because the cap increases, what cost it is to the team, and remember the cap increases because revenue increases, so the actual cost to the team is less than the most in the NFL or anything like that. So the two deals that people want to compare things to are the Kelsey deal, which is about 14.25 million, something around that, and the Kittle deal with 15 million. Now those aren't the highest averages, but they're up there. They're in the top 5. But they both signed their deals in 2020. Mark Andrews has a similar average. He signed his deal in 2021. So did Dallas Goedert. So the 4 of them plus Darren Waller were the top 5 in tight end average annual value. We just didn't have a premier tight end sign a new deal between 2021 and 2023. And so the cap number went up. It goes about 6-7% every year, and nothing changed. So when those deals were signed in 2020, the cap was about 88% of what it is now. So if we adjust everything to 2023 terms in terms of percentage of cap and only look at active tight ends, Hockenson's deal ranks 6th. The cost to the team relative to the cap environment that he's in ranks 6th. And I talked to a lot of people that suggest that Hockenson is a top 5-ish tight end. So that seems like a fair money deal. We knew that he was going to, quote unquote, reset the market, not necessarily because of the reporting that suggested he would, but because no new deal had been signed for 2-3 years. And so any good tight end was going to, quote unquote, reset the market.
Yeah. Practical guarantee number seems highest ever as well, 42.
Yeah. I mean, it's highest ever practical guaranteed. Yeah. Again, that comes in the cap environment.
So in some lenses, great for Hockenson, and honestly, how is it not great when you sign for that much guaranteed money? I mean, it's a great deal for him, but also seems like a really nice compromise, to be honest. Luke Braun, you were going to say something.
Yeah, it seems like that's just like what the market is for a top tier tight end, and I think TJ Hockenson is a top tier tight end, and to not call him that is NFC North rival cope. Like these market deals, these like second contract extensions, like the big extensions for players that are good, are really not as often determined by, okay, who is the best tight end? I think if you're looking at this, because of all the stuff Arif said,
determined that
almost never. Yeah. Like because of all the stuff Arif said, if you look at this at any extension and say, they paid TJ Hockenson the most money, they must think he's the best tight end in the league, then you got to look harder and try a little more.
Baby brain.
The production certainly does not measure up to a lot of those other guys he's in the same class with now. It doesn't measure up to Waller.
He did get like 900 yards last year.
If you look at the arbitrarily, if you're looking at 1,000-yard seasons, he has none. All those other guys have multiple. He did play for Detroit, but like you said, the Vikings are playing. They're paying for inflation. They're paying for the increase in revenue in the league. That's why he is up there with guys that might slightly outclass him from a production standpoint. But
I mean, gas costs a little bit more these days, Sam. You just gotta.
Yeah. Are you willing to admit now that Schefter has
Brandon for this?
I don't want to distract from this point. I would appreciate an apology. And a confession now that Schefter has snarkily tweeted a couple times today about this. That
he's the only one, by the way. Rossini has not suggested that it's a hold-in. Tom Pelissero has maybe kind of inferred that it could be a hold-in. Schefter's the only one that's called it a hold-in.
Also, Kwesi was asked about it today and outright denied it, which I don't know how far that goes for you, but bears a mention.
It goes, nowhere. It goes nowhere.
That goes
you really
somewhere
think GMs would go up on the podium and lie?
That goes somewhere for me, right? If you asked him if Danielle Hunter was holding in, he would say, I wouldn't call it that.
Kwesi said he deferred injury talk to Tyler and Kevin. He basically
is he a doctor?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to get nowhere with you guys.
No, he did that with Andrew Booth, too. Like, what are you
Here's what I'll say.
I shouldn't have even brought it up.
I think it's
weird. You can score a W against the two of us, Sam? We are obstinate. Obstinate and churlish.
I need Inman. Where's Inman? I need help. I need support. Where's Ron? Ron will
What is
support
the
me.
difference between Hockenson holding in, but it has to be a secret, and Daniil Hunter holding in, but it doesn't have to be a secret? That's my question. Why are we lying about one but not the other? Here's my guess is they probably were just extra cautious about injuries that otherwise would have been ignored because he was in the middle of a thing. And I guess you could call that a hold in technically.
Which is what I suggested on the last episode, that like he will return to practice after the deal is signed, not because the injuries are not real, but because the risk is greater in a world where he doesn't have guaranteed money.
The injuries, there may be an ounce of truth, but I'm willing to say they were greatly exaggerated. That's as far as I will go down this road.
I think I can meet you there. I don't know about greatly because
maybe they were exaggerated, but he like dressed for practice and didn't do anything.
Yeah, like he still did individual drills, and they said if this were real, he would be playing. So I don't know how exaggerated it is.
Convenient.
Yeah, like they did not tell us that this was a catastrophic injury that suddenly he recovered. He's not Paul Pierce, right? Like,
okay, so you're saying Schefter is wrong and Schefter is lying.
Yeah, and I've lost a lot of respect for Schefter over the past couple of years.
Well, Schefter,
I'm very comfortable.
Schefter
has
a lot.
impugned his honor maybe a couple times, but I don't know, guys. So T.J. Hockenson signs. He is locked in. I think the ripple effect here is that
he's locked on.
All right,
Locked on Sports Minnesota. We should get him on the show. I think this bodes not well for the future of KJ Osborne in Minnesota. KJ Osborne's future might be very bountiful on the free agent market. Hard to believe, though, that it's going to be as a Viking. Agreed with that.
Alexander Madison.
I mean, yeah, Madison tested the market, didn't he? And then came back, or did he?
Right.
Or am I thinking of Bradbury?
I don't think he tested the market outright. When did he sign? Let's find out.
Yeah, I forgot. But sometimes that's what happens, or sometimes they go out and they Jarius write this and they get another big deal. It makes sense.
Osborne,
it doesn't make sense for the Vikings to give him a contract extension for a second year now that I think drafting Addison was really the death knell there, because even if they didn't extend Hockenson, they were going to tag him, so he was going to be on the team after Osborne anyways. So I think that was kind of all right, Osborne, you're going to be here for 1 year, and then good luck on the free agent market. But yeah, I think he can do pretty well for himself, especially if he has another year like the last two he's had.
And the tag for wide receivers undoable, right?
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
Yeah. That would be a terrible idea. So he basically tested the market. So he signed right before actual free agency, but after legal tampering. The NFL is so stupid sometimes, like the way we have to talk about these things.
Legal tampering, baby.
That is the equivalent of the NBA and their draft day trades. How they refuse to acknowledge the new team. Yeah. They make them wear the fake hat.
Yeah. I love it.
Why do these leagues do so?
It's so perfect for the NBA, which is all about petty drama.
Right. And the fact that they have to wear the fake hat because they don't trade picks, they draft the players and then trade the player. At least on draft day, the fact that they have to wear the cap of a team that everybody knows they're not going to is honestly, it turns it all the way back around to beautiful. Like it's absurd, but now I'm in.
Because if that player turns into like a Hall of Famer or something, you get the funniest picture.
Oh yeah,
of him on a team that he never played for.
Yeah, like Ray Allen, I think had wasn't it Wolves? Didn't Ray Allen get drafted by the Wolves?
Maybe.
In that situation,
I don't know. I don't know anything about basketball.
Yeah. All
I know is that Johnny Flynn got drafted by the Wolves. That's the Wolves drafting knowledge I have.
Kevin Love I believe that was a trade with OJ Mayo and I want to say the Grizzlies. But anyway, this is not Locked on the NBA. That's a much better show. Do we have consensus?
Hard agree.
Oh yeah.
Do we have consensus amongst this three that this is a good deal? This is a good person to extend long term. This is Kwesi's first big deal. Did he give it to the right person? This is smart. Do we agree that this is a smart situation?
I mean, until we see the structure, we can't know for sure. But on the surface, I think it looks like a pretty good deal. I think that $48 million in cash for Hockenson over the first 3 years, I think that's good for the player, generally speaking. I think that in terms of these averages, the impact that TJ Hockenson has, the fact that you could very easily see him hitting 1,000 just because he hit like 900 last year, that is probably a good deal for the team. Again, the structure is going to help define a lot of things. If the cash is like loaded into like 2024, I've got some questions about what the team is doing, but
Mm-hmm.
right now it doesn't seem like a deal that on the surface looks bad for either side.
One of the biggest impacts Hockenson had when he got here last year was enabling the Vikings to push the ball down the field more. You can see it in like depth of target statistics and stuff. And if you look at the games where Justin Jefferson had the lowest stat totals, they almost perfectly inversely correlate to TJ Hockenson. That was the offense. If you're going to double Jefferson, we're going to punish you with the tight end here. And they can continue to do that. Now they have Addison adding a new layer to that. Keeping Hockenson in the building, I think, was a must. I think it wouldn't have been worth a second-round pick to get him for 1 year and a tag year. Keeping him in the building, the opportunity to extend him now. He is now locked into Minnesota until he is 30. He's a Viking. He's going to be, if he plays all that out, he's a Viking for longer than he was a Lion. That is,
he's going into the Hall as a Viking, obviously.
Yeah, and he's not going to do the Brett Favre 2 jerseys thing.
I've got one of these related to TJ.
It's time to tell you who spilled their proverbial drink on the sofa. Get ready for this week's party foul.
You are so quick with these bumpers, man.
Thanks. I'm looking at them the whole time, so it's not that. This is not like a rocket ship in here with a million buttons.
But what I'm saying is that, like, you know how like radio DJs will like hit you with the sound thing super fast in the middle of a sentence, and you're like, "What?" You're like that with like a 4-second bumper, right? I'm just like, oh, we're doing party fouls now. That's cool. Hey, let's talk about it.
Sure. Do we all need one?
People need it to be fast paced in today's day and age, Reef. There's no, I mean, and we never waste time on this show.
We're going to repost.
That's why it's so fast paced. There's no lag. There's no drivel. There's no fat to trim. People
we never get off topic.
Yeah.
There's no filler.
There's never a time when I can't get my statement out because people are trying to talk over it. All right. Can we have like the ultimate oral history written about TJ Hockenson's first week in Minnesota and then just can we let it go? We're still asking questions about TJ's mythic first week as a Viking, how he learned the playbook so fast. It was great.
I haven't talked about it once.
I was so impressed, and I stopped being that impressed quickly after. I was like, okay, that was really cool. Like, let's put an end date, a statute of limitations on when we can be done talking about TJ Hockenson's entrance into the building. What is the date?
As
probably week 10, 2022.
Right. You're speaking as if this is like a shared experience in the discourse, and I just haven't seen people talk about it that much. The first day in camp, they talked to him about it, and it was in the context of like, now that you know the playbook, which is cool, how much more enabled can the offense be as a result of your presence? And he talked about it. People wrote stories. This is the last time I've seen anyone discuss it. So like,
it came up today in the press conference. This is why I'm bringing it up again.
Oh yeah,
didn't O'Connell say something about like, we're not worried that he's missing a lot of camp because of these injuries, because look, he missed camp last year. Wasn't that like the deal?
He missed camp last year is a good way to put it.
Yeah, he came in on a Wednesday. And
that's a good context though. That it's appropriate.
Like that's a relevant point, but I don't think it's one we need to like hammer all day.
Yeah, I just feel like it's been overplayed.
Tired.
It's been a little overplayed.
I like it.
No, this is like when people talk about like songs that they're sick of because you hear them all the time on the radio, and I'm just like, I don't listen to the radio. You're probably right. That song's.
Sometimes I'll hear a song like that for the first time, like months into its overplayed run, and everybody's like, "God, I hate this song." I'm like, I don't know, kind of catchy. I've heard it was like the second time I've ever listened to it.
Yeah, Olivia Rodrigo knows how to go.
Yeah.
This T Swift is something else. Real lyricist.
Taylor Swift?
Coming up, 53-man roster breakdown, the pros, the cons, the practice squads. That's after a word from FanDuel Sportsbook, and the new promotions going on there. It's America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. People love it because they've got great promotions going on all the time, and that often includes free money. New customers, spend $5, get $200 in your account in bonus bets you can put on literally anything. So many ways to wager on football or outside of football. All customers also, you can bet $5, Get $100 off the new NFL Sunday Ticket. It's now on YouTube or YouTube TV. So bet 5, get $100 off that new package. YouTube TV. Great promotion going on at FanDuel.com/lockedon or the FanDuel Sportsbook app, which is so easy to use, so secure, a great user experience, and it gets greater when you get free money. So check it out today. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Thanks so much for watching today on the Locked On Podcast Network. Please comment below what you think of the TJ Hockenson deal. That's on YouTube on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Please subscribe and find us free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That could also include the SXM, SiriusXM app. Search Locked On Sports Minnesota. All right, fellas, let's go back 2 days in time. 53-man roster came out since the Vikings have IR'd Kene Nwangwu. They have waived Jalen Reagor, signed Myles Gaskin, signed David Quessenberry, another tackle. Let's first get thoughts on actually, let's just get overall thoughts on the 53 construction as it stands now, beginning with Luke Braun.
Some years it feels like it's hard to find 53 players that are worth keeping, and some years it's hard to figure out who to cut. And I feel like this year was the latter, which is nice. I think there's a couple things I don't necessarily agree with, but it's all bottom roster churn stuff that's not really going to have a huge impact on the season. It's kind of funny, like we do the 53-man roster thing, and then it's like how many we got right, how many we got wrong, and then we just like forget about it entirely. And now TJ Hockenson's extended, and it's time to start thinking about Tampa Bay.
Specifically, what bottom of the roster stuff do you disagree with? Because this is the time to do the minutia. Yeah,
so I guess I mean, it's the Andre Carter thing. I think exposing to Luigi Villon to waivers, which he did make it through, so we got away with it. But I thought that was a bigger risk than exposing Andre Carter to waivers, because if anybody watched Andre Carter's preseason tape, I'm not sure that he was at too much risk of getting poached. And I believe the way that it works is his contract with the money he was guaranteed when they signed him would offset like his practice squad salary, and would basically he would be like a very highly paid practice squad person. I think that's the way it works. Either way, it's $300,000. It's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, he's getting that either way. I thought that actually makes more sense, but like my initial thought was that he would get the normal practice squad salary in addition to $300,000, because that I thought was like maybe a signing bonus more than it was like a guarantee over salary.
You could be right. I don't know.
I think it is signing bonus money.
Okay, if it's all signing bonus, it would be $300,000 plus the $200,000 you would make over 18 weeks.
Okay.
But if some of it is guaranteed in salary, that salary is probably treated with offsets. Yeah. Which I've never thought about practice squad offsets before, but that makes sense.
Either way, they didn't feel comfortable exposing him to waivers. And hey, look, like they probably have a lot more insider information on that market than me. They might know like, oh man, Cincinnati really wants this guy. Like they might actually have a real line on that I don't have. So I kind of just have to accept it.
Before you continue, I just want to push back on that specific one. It's just, I think that he has had the highest signing bonus in the history of UDFAs. Now we just talked about how
because someone was bidding against them, right?
Right, exactly. And even if you adjust for cap, the thing we just talked about, Hockenson, it's like the third or fourth highest. And if you ignore Lyle Collins, it's like the second or third highest. It's like Philadelphia Carson Strong was the only one that was higher. And yeah, I think that means there was a market for it. And I think that teams are very willing to rely on their initial assessment of a player if they're a rookie and the preseason's not that good, especially if they know that player was hurt at the beginning of camp, right? Mm-hmm. So they would have an understanding that this player, wouldn't necessarily be full go. And then final, before you go back again, Luke, I think part of the reason that he fell in the draft may have had to do with some confusion about service academies. And if that confusion is resolved, they may have considered him draftable. And if that's the case, there's no way he would have cleared waivers. And that's speculation. I have no idea why he necessarily fell in the draft. Only having 11 bench reps is kind of concerning, right? But
Right. Well, yeah, that's the whole thing about him.
He's
right,
always been in
body's
need
not in
of
the right
a
shape
bulk
for
up and a
the
year in a
NFL.
training room with
Yeah.
pro training.
Yeah, that was always going to be the
because I mean,
plan.
and again, that's a service academy thing. There's only
Yep.
so much size you can have to be at the academy. It limits their football team.
You have to get in a certain kind of shape and then in another kind of shape and then back in the first kind of shape. It's really hard.
Yeah, so like it's not like the same kind of concern as a player that is trying, but like I think that teams had a very high draft assessment of them and needed some clarity in some other areas for them, and that I think changes the equation a little bit.
Yeah.
I also think Luigi Villain is better to roster, but I think they wanted to keep both, and they thought that this was the highest probability of keeping both. And I think they were probably right.
It's interesting because I mean there are 5th-round picks that cleared waivers, right? So having a draftable grade doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get claimed onto someone's 53 over someone you just had a good enough preseason to make your team. And with Villan too, like I guess here's the thing. Andre Carter on the 53, if we experience a whole bunch of injuries at edge, we're going through Luigi Villan and Benton Whitley first because that's the way it worked on the depth chart in the preseason. Which kind of tells you like how high are you on this guy? Either way, whatever. It's just a roster stash. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but that was kind of the one that I didn't feel great about. I also thought that trading Vidarian Lowe and getting a 6th as opposed to trading Oli Udoh, saving more money and probably getting a less draft pick. Like I would have done the latter. Of course, again, I don't know what the market was, so maybe there weren't any takers or anything like that.
And Quessenberry,
but that feels like the tackle depth
is a little bit.
But I am not happy with the tackle depth. That's, I guess, the 2 negative takes I have. But otherwise, hey man, Najee Thompson made the team, so that pretty much made my day, and I don't care what else happens for the rest of it.
All right, let's get into that. Let's give you the full victory lap. 77,900 people have seen the clip that you posted from May 4th, 2023 on this show. For those, but I don't want to assume people have seen it or that if people are tuning in for the first time, thank you. Luke Braun is a psychic. This is what he said just after the draft, just after UDFAs were announced.
I'm going way deeper than that. I'm going with an undrafted free agent. And I'm not going to do the Ivan Pace thing. All right, that's too easy. I'm going Najee Thompson. The cornerback room, that back end of it is a little bit more open still. You have Byron Murphy. Yeah, Murky.
Najee Thompson, that guy?
Yeah. Okay, you have to watch this on YouTube to get Sam's face.
You're on the roster.
Yeah, genuinely disgusting.
You asked for a sleeper, Sam.
That is the hottest take I've ever heard.
This guy's sleeping so deep he might be in a coma.
Yeah, let me lay this down. Right, so you have that was good. Caleb Evans, Booth, Murphy, Mekhi Blackman, Jay Ward. Those 5 probably locks, right? That's 5 corners.
Out of the
Jawan Williams?
out of the 3 UDFA corners, I got to know why it's this one.
Have you seen his testing?
The other 2 made the practice because I talked to him. Listen to Locked On Vikings podcast next week. And because he takes
you get why my reaction
so much more seriously.
You realized I was
you're
just
going to be
plugging my
CB6,
show,
CB7, you have to make it on special teams. And special teams is a pride of his. He's new to cornerback. He played wide receiver a bunch in college. It's like barely a thing, but he takes it so seriously, blocking kicks, playing special teams on multiple units, and being that kind of guy that makes the team in that way. So that is my deep sleeper for the 53-man roster. And it's not like there's anybody, after those first 5, it's not like there's anybody in that room that you're like, God, but we have to cut Jawan Williams. That's doable, I think, for a guy that can be an asset everywhere on special teams. This is not a guy that's
evidently
would they cut Jawan Williams
from scrimmage. Chris Boyd never made it from scrimmage. He made it because he was good at special teams. That's going to be where it's at. And Najee Thompson, he is so giddy about special teams. You got to listen to the interview. It's going to go up next week.
This teaches you to have courage in your convictions, Luke.
Bravo.
That is the lesson I learned, because the majority of the stuff I got wrong was stuff that I thought, like my pre-camp roster prediction was better than the one that was like the day before cut down.
I love that. Well, we know that you're of weak moral character, which is why you folded on your take. I also remember this when Najee Thompson made that first tackle on punt. I remember this conversation, but I didn't remember which player it was you were talking about. And I was like, was he hyping up CJ Colden? Man, I hope so, because that means he was wrong. And it was actually Najee Thompson. That's the special team superstar. No, but you nailed it.
Yeah.
The precision too.
It's It was, I think, because I looked at, like, there was that clip goes on for like we talked about it for a while, and we talked about like RAS and stuff.
Yeah, I also
and the fact that he's wasn't a wide receiver anymore, only a corner for 2 years, and wasn't particularly productive, wasn't particularly athletic. It's like, okay, but there is a reason they brought him in. Like, they know all that. So what's the missing piece here? And that was kind of what started the train of thought.
So I wanted to see how, because Sam said that I made fun of you for that take, and I don't recall doing that, and certainly I didn't do that in that clip, except when you plugged your own show, which I think is completely fair.
Oh, yeah. And I don't apologize.
Yeah, right. It was totally fair for you. I plug my thing all the time. Totally fair for you to plug it. Totally fair for me to roll my eyes.
You push back harder, sort of like later after that clip. But
so I watched it and I was like, oh my god, this guy's like ran like a 7-second 40. Holy crap!
Yeah.
But that was
which
like
is
about
because he's got like track speed.
He just books it down there, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But like,
is it like a rainy pro day or something?
That it could be it. I don't know. It's always tough.
Poor footing. Like, he runs. He looks freaking fast when he runs as a gunner.
Call him Flash.
But we can't. That's Cordell Patterson's nickname.
There's
another gunner. We can't. Yeah. We can't confuse our gunners. But yeah, I thought like and at the time I was thinking, I didn't say it on the podcast, so that's actually a pretty good way to look at it. Because that's the reason they brought Dan Chisena in. That's the reason that you brought Marcus Sherrills in back in 2015. Although he wasn't really brought in, he was a camp tryout and then signed. It's a little bit different, but that's the reason that he makes the roster. And so, and I guess someone mentioned, I didn't look this up to see if it was true, but someone mentioned that he was like a special team All-American, which that would make sense, right?
And you'd never have to spend a draft pick on a guy you could be the best punt gunner in the nation. You're not getting drafted on just that. So
of
course he's going to be an undrafted guy,
right? Yeah.
And this is another.
He's no Jake Moody.
This is another win for PFF too. And again, I'll plug Matthew Collar's upcoming book about Pro Football Focus, but chapter about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Huge believer in it. Thinks PFF was instrumental in his career. I mean, you could not have quantified Najee Thompson until the last decade, and now you can look. And I talked about this in yesterday's show, but if you missed it, he is in the top 5% of all college football special teamers for the majority of his career. And there's like 2,000 guys that play 100 or more special team snaps, and he's in the top 5% routinely. Like that could never
your
have
tweet
been
said for 4 consecutive years he was in the top 5%, right?
Yeah, like the top 70 in grades
of 2,000
out of a 2,000 man pool. That is extremely, extremely good. So, and that again, that's good work by the Viking scouting staff to eyeball that and to come up with that one.
Yeah, Sam, you mentioned that you wanted a story on how necessarily like the ins and outs, which I would pitch that to Alec Lewis. That seems like the kind of story he would write. But the kind of about the scouting process that got them to Najee Thompson, because hey, you can say I bet that they were looking at PFF grades and that helped them narrow down who Matt Daniels will look at, and he looked over 100 odd players and he zeroed in on 50 of them, and then he got the scouts to ask about all 50 of them and narrowed it down to I bet that's what happened. But hearing about it, especially hearing like Matt Daniels, because who doesn't want to hear Matt Daniels talk about his favorite special teamers, right? But like hearing that would be an astounding story. I think it would be a better story than the ins and outs of the TJ Hockenson signing, right? Like I think that
something
that would be cool. What do you got?
Kevin Fielder I think it was at Vikings Wire, wrote kind of that piece when the Vikings signed him, like way back in May, and that dude's a total sicko. And actually went and watched some of the tape and was like, look at him on special teams here at Georgia Southern. Like he somehow found Georgia Southern punt gunning tape and actually kind of did that breakdown. So I linked it to you in response to that tweet, but I figured I'd mention it again.
That's very cool. So, and this is his niche now. Like the fact that he gets rostered this year and doesn't get worse at this thing makes you think that he's got some security. Like if the Vikings value it now, odds are they will value it next year too if he remains the best gunner on the team.
Unless got to make the team every year.
Unless someone typos their text to Tom Pelissero again, in which case you'll be cut again.
Oh my goodness, the drama around that too.
That was very funny. Well, especially because we had such a moment on the show about that specific player. For that to happen was just beautiful.
What a roller coaster.
Unbelievable. Braun's depression in that moment. And I saw someone screenshot the Pelissero tweet. Then I went to Pelissero's page and didn't find it. So he clearly deleted it, and my antenna went up, and I thought, "Oh, something's fishy here." And then we got
because he responded to the tweet, so he must have responded to the tweet. And he's like, my mistake," and then later deleted it, even though he had chained a tweet into it.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense, just because people can find it like on their For You page and
do it. But that is funny to me.
Let's get a word on Gaskin and Quessenberry, new running back and new tackle. Let's start with the running back. Arif, give it a grade, 1 to 10. What do you think? If this is, let's assume he's the RB2, 1 to 10.
8.
You're a fan.
I think it's a good signing. It's tough because it's like, what does an RB2 grade max out to? Kareem Hunt with the Browns that first time. And even then, everyone was like, didn't he like kick a person? I don't know. Right. It's like, so it's always like tough to like grade a backup signing, but I think that this is one of the better moves that they could have made. Kareem Hunt had lost some juice last year. So they hosted him, and maybe they had considered after hosting him that he hadn't actually recovered his physical capability. He had the lowest number of touches in a Browns uniform last year ever. And I think that was related to it. They wanted to bring in D'Ernest Johnson a little bit more. They really liked Jerome Ford. And so having Kareem Hunt, available, I thought told us something. Whereas it feels like the Dolphins got rid of Gaskin in part because they just drafted a running back, but also they anticipated being able to trade for Jonathan Taylor. This is a whole other thing.
Yeah. Well, they just couldn't roster all of them. Someone was
they had so many. Yeah. And Gaskin was like the leading rusher for the Dolphins last year, and I thought he looked pretty good. He had some pretty good bursts. I don't think he's a starting quality back. That's not going to be his role. He's a pretty good pass catcher. He does have some capacity to return, which is going to be important because Wongwu just hit IR. And so
they said Chandler will be the fill-in for now.
Yeah, but it's good to have players.
Definitely.
And so having all of that available to you is going to be good. So I like the signing a lot. I don't want to say that like an 8 out of 10 means that they got like an incredible steal off of essentially waivers, but I do think that this is maybe the best possible move at the position that they could have made.
Price is certainly right at $1.2 million.
Yeah.
And someone that fulfills that pass catching, passing game need that maybe you were looking for more consistently with Chandler. Braun, your thoughts?
With Gaskin, I'm like exceedingly neutral on this. Whatever, it's a guy in depth.
Yeah.
They wanted a veteran. That was very clear. I guess they called Melvin Gordon too, which I certainly
that's what I heard.
over that.
I'm glad they went with Gaskin.
Yeah, definitely glad they didn't end up there. But they wanted a veteran, and it makes sense, right? They've got a lot of young bodies in the running back room, and they wanted somebody that can read things out properly, which Myles Gaskin can. The offense he learned in Miami, very similar to what the Vikings are going to do in their run game. And so that hopefully will translate, get him up to speed very quickly. I don't know if he will be RB2. Is that something that they've said? I thought that was going to be Chandler anyways. And
just speculative.
Be the third.
Very well could be Chandler. I guess maybe like if he wasn't going to be RB2, do you think that they would have invested in an RB3?
Yeah.
How much did they invest?
I think
it's just a waiver claim, right?
Is it a waiver or is it a $1.2 million deal? I don't think it's a waiver. We saw the list of waiver claims in Minnesota. Did not
he wasn't on it.
Yeah,
okay, so it's like a min deal then.
Yeah,
basically. Do we even know?
Okay, I don't think it's a minimum deal, in which case the cap hit is only $800,000, which makes it even better. But I can look it up. But the distinction between RB2 and RB3 in this kind of committee-ish system is not that important to me.
Right.
I would imagine.
You just need a guy that knows what he's looking at, and he's that, so works. Sure.
Yep.
Quessenberry. Luke Braun, you expressed doubt about the tackle depth.
I still have doubt about the tackle depth. I don't think he's very good. He's a very old player, which like he was a 2013 draft pick. Of course, I mean, he had quite a story to get here, so he doesn't have the same amount of wear and tear that you usually would have for a player.
I don't know that this would like disqualify. It's just a different kind of wear and tear.
Fair enough. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and had to deal with that much earlier in his career, which is an awesome story.
It was a huge thing when he like came back to the Texans after it had been in remission. It was so cool, but like
it was so cool. He's bounced around a couple of teams since then, most recently on the Bills, and with
Bills,
the
Titans,
Bills,
Texans,
I flicked on a little bit of his last preseason game, and I didn't like love what I saw. He plays really high. He punches really high. I don't think he's getting in before Oli Udoh. He's kind of just a body there, but like the Vikings have struggled so hard to find reasonable tackles over this whole preseason. I mean, how many have they signed and cut, and then they're bringing in other guys on their practice squad? So I guess this is the guy that they could find.
This is the most serious attempt, though, at least more serious than Bobby Evans.
Sure. Much more serious than Bobby Evans. But I also think that he's not on the roster on week 5, and then Chris Reed comes back, right? Like,
assuming Chris Reed's ready,
yeah. So like, I think this is just a placeholder for Chris Reed. Obviously, they play 2 different positions, but because Blake Brandel can play both tackle and guard, it's just kind of where that depth, where he moves, where that depth kind of flows. So that's my guess. So I don't even have much to react to it because I don't think he's going to be an 18-week player.
No, I think what I would have, what I wanted, and I don't know if this was available or even possible, and that's sort of being in this position in the first place is kind of the failure I'm perhaps more disappointed in. But I wanted a guy that was better than Oli Udoh, and they did have one on the roster, and they just flipped him for a 6th round.
Traded him, I still don't know about that, man.
Yeah, so I think maybe it's just sort of disappointment in that rolling over into another thing. But this guy is not better than Oli Udoh, and that means if he is a 4 or 5 week player, that means he's not seeing the field.
You're gonna have to convince a lot of people because a lot of people don't think Oli Udoh can play tackle, despite the fact that the last time he played tackle for the Vikings outside of the preseason, he looked all right.
I know he's younger.
Have we not learned that, especially on offensive line, that it can always get worse? Have we not? Do we not have object permanence? Did y'all not watch the last 8 years of the Vikings? It can always get worse.
Hey man, Storm Norton's out there, man. He just got cut. You can bring him in. Yeah,
he's still kicking.
I've been waiting
LA Wildcats
for a Vikings Chargers
and AAF
immaculate grid
San Diego Fleet
to use Storm Norton. I've been so excited to do that. I can't. I am surprised though that you think he's not better than Udoh. Like if you look at Udoh's 1 season trying to be a full-time offensive lineman and Quessenberry's 1 season
he was playing
trying
guard.
to be a full-time.
At guard, I'm not holding that against him as much.
The guy is
Udoh.
Okay,
has
so he's
better
39-inch arms. He can't play guard.
Udoh plays with better posture.
Yeah.
That will carry him beyond all the holding penalties, all the other stuff. It's just going to mean he gets beat less than Quessenberry.
Pass protection might be an issue for Quessenberry. Tennessee had some schematic run game differences than Minnesota, but he was very, very good at run blocking that year, 2021. As a right,
Udoh is very strong. That helps a lot in run blocking.
He holds very tightly on the opponent's jersey as they try to run by.
There's that
you're
too.
right, but he does not let go.
Being a strength-based tackle versus somebody who isn't, like, I don't love the way that Udoh kick slides and stuff like that, but just the fact that he's big and strong and powerful, all of the other little finessey, nuancy things kind of go out the window a little bit.
They kind of wash over.
Like,
Yeah,
well, it's kind of
like
push a guy.
It's kind of like arm strength can overcome like mechanical deficiencies to an extent in a quarterback. It gives you a better margin for error on some of the technical stuff.
Right.
I get it. And I do want to add, grip strength is a really important feature for tackles. It's just kind of knowing when to let go, which is, I think, a lesson we can all learn.
Keep it inside the frame. You'll be fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that even though we saw the preseason struggles for Udoh at tackle, right? I mean, he just did not play well this preseason. I still think that Brandel is likely the first guy to go up. I do think that we are overly concerned about Udoh just because we have an understanding of who he is as a player based on a season where he played guard, and he was only playing guard because A, the Vikings just underinvested there, but B, Mike Zimmer remembered the story of Mike Harris moving from tackle to guard. And Mike Harris was awesome at guard before the brain thing, which sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, there's like a he should never have been a guard.
There was a minute where the Vikings
Had a
were
great
actually
camp.
hitting on some guards, some interior line decisions, and they got overly confident that they didn't have to invest. They're like, oh, let's just swing Joe Berger in here. Mike Harris, come on down. John Sullivan was here for a while. This is great. We can do this.
Hey, Brandon Fusco had a killer 2013.
Brandon Fusco, pre-Zimmer, was very good.
Yeah. Well, pre-multiple pectoral tears. Let's, come on.
That's what opened the door for Mike Harris, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had originally signed as a tackle. He wasn't that good of a tackle, I believe, also in San Diego. But, you know, Mike Zimmer was like, yeah, he had long arms too, which is not really comparable, right? Like, he had kind of long arms for a guard. Olu Udoh has long arms for any kind of football player, period. Like, they are different categories of long arm, which for people who are unfamiliar, because of how quickly stuff moves on the interior of the offensive line, you need to get your arms up really quickly in position. The longer arms that are usually a benefit to tackles can become a detriment at guard. And we've seen this for right tackles who have been drafted as right tackles because of their size. When they move inside, they're sluggish at getting first contact, which is really important to establishing that first initial couple of microseconds of offensive line play. And so long arms can be a detriment if you don't move them quickly enough. Who's the guys? DJ Fluker, I think, is a really great example of that. He's not a great tackle, but he's a much worse guard. And
It was the
part of that
Remmers
is,
thing, right?
yeah, I think actually Remmers is kind of similar. His arm length isn't nearly as much, but I think that's a similar thing. Remmers just has better natural timing at tackle, and better natural timing specifically at right tackle, where it's, I don't know. The Remmers thing was just a mess. I think his agent was kind of right that Remmers kind of got screwed, but
sure.
over the course of his career. But yeah, so like that's why I bring that up and why there is a distinct difference between Udoh at guard and Udoh at tackle.
This is the part of the show everybody stayed around for. Practice squad constructed. All 16 have been signed. And is there a training camp darling that wasn't brought onto the practice squad? Probably a good reminder
Wilson
that
Huber.
Yes. Just because we think these guys are like showing off in practice and looking really good and they might get poached, they're probably not going to get poached. Jawan Williams as a veteran gets on. Sheldon Day as a veteran gets on. Luigi Villain, Lucky Jackson, Thayer Thomas. Says he did not.
He's a Jaguars practice squatter now.
Yep.
Okay. And that I don't mourn that, to be honest with you.
It's fine.
Yeah. I think that defensive, like all the guys that were tied as sort of middling rotational defensive linemen, they just cut all of them. It seemed like
Pretty much.
Yeah. Who did I miss? McBride made it on. He stays in the organization. Tristan Jackson, and then the corners that
Lucky Jackson.
Lucky Jackson, a little more of a surprise.
That one surprised me a little bit. I like Thayer Thomas. I saw coming. I think we all saw Tristan Jackson coming. But the Lucky Jackson one is interesting. No Blake Pearl.
Of those four, like Lucky Jackson, Tristan Jackson, Blake Pearl, Thayer Thomas, those guys were the ones playing the most in the like preseason with the twos. Yeah. And it kind of became a who gets last place situation. And I guess with all the drops, that's Pearl.
Yeah.
Plus the injury concerns, you know.
Well, Jalen Williams.
And he's got like another career as a
he'll be fine.
Too, right? Yeah.
As a singer. He's got a golden voice.
Perfect.
If I had a nitpick with the roster construction, I do worry about corner. Now, I think it gets mitigated by having the ability.
This is a big issue. It is a big issue.
That's real.
Alert.
Yeah.
Having Jawan available as an elevation might make you feel a tad better. Having these big nickel looks that are so trendy with this team might make you feel a little better that you won't be always using even three corners on the field at once. But when your fifth corner is Najee, who is not a defensive player, your fourth corner is vulnerable every single play to get injured, that worries me. Does it worry you guys?
Yeah, I think the overall quality of those players worries me, honestly, a little bit more. That we're one injury away from starting Andrew Booth, who is not ready to be a starter. But that, I mean, that's why Jawan Williams is there. If you do get an injury to, say, Mekhi Blackman, you need someone else to play nickel. Hey, you can put Jay Ward there. He still can kind of count as a de facto other corner if you want, but I could see, I don't think that this group of 5 nominal cornerbacks is going to be the way it stays all season.
Fair enough. Thought we might see a waiver claim, and we did not. There's not a lot of good corners that are floating out there. If you're decent, you're probably not getting cut, to be honest. And that's why Juwan Williams getting back to the practice squad does have value. Just, a little more reliable than someone like Jalen Williams, for instance, if they needed to call up in a pinch. The book is also...
I do want to say Jalen Williams did all right in that first preseason game. It
interception.
Was everything else that was a concern, which, I mean, when you're undrafted practice squad
just
guy,
too
that's
volatile.
fine. Yeah. But I just want to add on the practice squad stuff. I did like to see Alan Ali there. That was kind of my pick among the offensive linemen to add. Hakeem Adeniji is interesting, whatever. But I love that both TJ Smith and Sheldon Day are there. I thought that's fantastic to be able to retain them, because I think, again, adjusting our expectations for the quality of practice squad players, it's fantastic to retain them.
And those could be guys that get elevations for like a specific matchup, because they're like, oh, we just really like how Sheldon Day works against that particular right guard.
Yeah.
Or like a very Belichick-y move.
Yeah. This is a team that cannot run inside zone. They can only run outside zone. So we're calling up TJ Smith. So we got multiple nose tackles to be able to, that kind of thing. So, and
Nick Vigil, old friend.
Yeah. Old friend, Nick Vigil. Yeah. So, which
underrated.
I think is important because I agree.
And
also,
for sure.
Also like 4 linebackers, even in a system like this, that's going to have fewer linebacker snaps than even most nickel systems do. 4 is just always tough, right? Because you're always like 1 away from being in panic mode. So having Nick Vigil is nice.
Last thing, the book is closed on the Jalen Reagor, Ross Blacklock trades, both waived. Kwesi defended this today at the press conference and said, hey, it's all part of a portfolio. We're gonna miss, we're gonna whiff, we're gonna hit. We look at the full body of work, but we're gonna take risks as an organization. So with that said, would you want to see more swings like that taken on guys that don't have it for a couple of years with their organization, but might have had high draft qualities? How do you feel about that, Arif?
Yeah, sure. I don't have much to add to that. Yeah, take shots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Throw darts.
It's fine. Could have been a guy that is your punt returner for 2 or 3 years. That could be worth a little bit of day 3 capital. Ross Blacklock could have been something more. You're paying for a range of outcomes, not just the outcome you got. So
which is how Kwesi always talks about it. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that like a bad outcome isn't a bad outcome. Like, yeah, all right, those probably didn't give you the ROI you were looking for, but I don't think that should necessitate a change in strategy.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
The thing is just like, how often does, say, a 6th round pick help you out? Compare that to the range of outcomes for,
right. How often does that guy make the team, mostly contribute on special teams for 1 year, then get cut year 2? That's essentially what happened here.
It's a very realistic way to look at what draft picks represent, because I think on one hand, you could say, if you're bringing in guys that have been washouts for 2 years, the ceiling is severely limited. And why not use that pick to find someone that could, in the 1% chance, be a star? But the more realistic numbers-based way to look at it might be, can we get like a role player for 2 years out of this deal? And maybe that's even more than the average 6th round pick.
Yeah, if you get a role player for 2 years out of a 6th round pick, I think you're doing okay there.
It's not an adventurous way to look at it, but it might be better.
6th round picks, their rookie year, make the roster about like 35%. It's way less than people think.
Yeah, you're not getting a Stephon Diggs every day. I think people expect like, oh, we're taking a swing at a starter with like every single these guys are depth and special teams and practice squatters.
Right,
they fill out the roster. That's why there's more.
And you get more Stacey Coley's than you get Stephon Diggs. Right?
Yeah,
like that's just what happens. I think that's fine. I think that at some point, obviously, you have to evaluate. Picks are also very useful when you're attempting to do things like trade up or move around in the draft. So it has a little bit more. But I think that overall, that's a fine strategy. And this is emblematic of what Adofo-Mensah has been doing throughout. He has been buying low on players. There are players that have washed out at other organizations that have turned into really solid players for the second or third organization. This could have been one of those examples. That's fine, right?
Tyrese Tonga.
Yeah, like it's exactly right. It's fine to attempt to do those kinds of things because you could end up probably not a Chris Carter, but I mean, that's what happened, right? So like, you know, it's fine to like say, hey, you could have gotten a star in the 6th round. You can get a star. Like Jalen Reagor had star potential. That's why he was drafted in the 1st round. You know, that's why you go after players like Za'Darius Smith coming off of a bad year with the Packers. It's why you come after, Marcus Davenport coming off of a bad year with the Saints. That's even why you go after Byron Murphy. He's coming off of an injured season with the Cardinals, right? Like if we say, hey, you should buy low on players. You can't just turn around and praise only the ones that worked out and get mad at the ones that don't work out unless you knew beforehand which ones were and weren't. In which case, you should have this job. That's crazy that you know that.
It's the easiest way to look smart without actually being smart. It's a great grift.
Yeah.
I do need to bring this up. I'm contractually obligated, in fact, to bring this up every day until he's signed, but bring Duke Shelley home. That's all I have to say.
He's out there.
Make it.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
crowded corner room.
If you read Raiders coverage, they were also surprised.
They seem upset.
Yeah.
They seem very perplexed as to why. Yeah. His grades are pretty good.
Be into it.
Yeah. So if people covering the Raiders were like, yeah, Duke Shelley was cut, that makes sense. I would have just been like, that's it. He's done. 1-year wonder. That's fantastic. I'm glad he had a good season in Minnesota. But the fact that like he apparently had a pretty good camp in a preseason, bring him in. We don't need Lucky Jackson.
Yeah, we'll be all right. One other thing with Reagor that probably bears mentioning is so he has like a 2.4 million dead cap hit or something like that with a bunch of guaranteed rookie money, but that also has offset language. So
I was about
whatever
to ask
money
offsets,
yeah, it does. So for whatever money he signs for at his next destination, whether it's the vet minimum or I think as we're recording this, the waivers for the day haven't processed, so that still could happen. Somebody could claim him. Either way, whatever money he ends up making, the Vikings will get a cap credit for that amount, up to the amount that, they were paying. So if somebody pays him the full 2.4, like they claimed him, the Vikings get a cap credit next year for that. So they get their money back. If they get the vet minimum, then they get a cap credit for that and they get some of their money back. So something to keep an eye on.
If he signs for $1 million, then the Vikings have 1.4 million that they're liable for, basically.
Right. And then they get the other $1 million back next year.
Yeah, and because the cap space was going to be used as rollover either way, it's the same.
Yeah.
Very good intel. Thank you, gentlemen. Luke Braun, Arif Hasan, part of the Minnesota Football Party. We'll be back on Monday talking Minnesota Vikings football. Ron Johnson will host the roundtable tomorrow with Luke Inman, Reggie Wilson, and myself. That's all at Locked On Sports Minnesota. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Of course, it is free. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Arif. Great show. Lots of news to digest. I'm Sam Ekstrom saying goodbye for today on the Minnesota Football Party.